Hello and welcome to this video on consumer behavior. So in this video we're going to look at two things. First of all, the assumption of rationality, and then secondly, why that assumption actually might be quite limited in economics. So in economics, when we're looking at demand and supply and markets, we always assume that people act rationally. But do we always engage in rational, logical, sensible, in our own best interests, behavior? Perhaps you exercise too little. Perhaps you have some bad habits. Do you always search out the best price? Do you weigh up every pro and con in your head before making a decision? Do all businesses look to maximize their profits? When we start to question it, we might see that not every single decision we take has a fully logical and rational basis. And typically we assume that when people are making decisions, they do so to maximize their own welfare, to make themselves as happy as they can. And for most of our Year 1 microeconomics course, we assume that rational consumers wish to maximize their satisfaction, their welfare or their utility, from consuming goods and services by correctly choosing how to spend their limited income. We also assume that producers and firms wish to maximize their profits by producing at the lowest costs and by producing goods and services that are desired by customers. We also assume that governments wish to improve the economic and social welfare of their citizens. And for most part, these are reasonable assumptions to make, but we might question whether they always apply in every circumstance. So let's now look at some of the limitations of this assumption of rationality. And this area of economics is known as behavioral economics. And behavioral economics tries to mix economics with psychology and looks at problems through the eyes of a human being with lots going on in their heads rather than a purely rational, logical economic agent. So we use insights from psychology to explain why people make apparently irrational decisions. So why do people eat too much, take too little exercise, or don't save enough for retirement? An economic agent, when we're talking about normal kind of classical economics, we say they're very rational, very intelligent, and will always do cost-benefit analyses to decide what is the right option. But most of us aren't like this. Instead, we adopt rules of thumb and we go with our gut feel sometimes, rather than trying to calculate optimal solutions for every decision we make. So what are some alternative views of consumer behavior if we're not entirely logical and rational? Well, a lot of this comes from thinking of modern day kind of psychologists / economists. An example would be Daniel Kahneman and his book Thinking Fast and Slow. He identified that people have two broad ways of thinking. A first system that's about thinking fast, and this is subconscious and automatic. We don't think twice about it, it just happens. The second system is where we think slow and controlled and consciously, and we go through it in our head. And we tend to use system 2 when thinking the decision is really important, highly personal to us, or it may have an impact on other people. So let's have a look at some unusual behavior. The first one is habitual behavior, and this refers to a rigid pattern of behavior. So people subconsciously might purchase identical items each week without really thinking, do I want that, or do I still need that? This is often linked with system 1 style thinking, where you just go on what you've done in the past. A good example here would be people continuing with their insurance provider even though other companies may offer lower prices. And this doesn't make rational sense, but because it's habitual behavior, people continue to do it. Related to that is an idea of inertia. And in behavioral economics, inertia is the endurance of a stable state associated with inaction. And basically the concept of the status quo, that people won't really be bothered to go to an alternative because it's something different. And they just lack that momentum or that initiative or that desire to actually change their consumer behavior. Our third one is other people and this concept of people following the herd. So individuals who act collectively as part of a group often make decisions as a group that they would not make as an individual. And this might be Explained in two ways. Firstly, the social pressure to conform means that individuals want to be accepted, and so they try and behave in the same way as others. And secondly, individuals find it hard to believe that a large group could be wrong. The old saying, two heads are better than one. So people will often make irrational decisions just because everyone else is. And this has strong links to game theory, thinking about what other people are doing and having that influence your behavior. Another behavioral issue becomes from people's lack of ability to do computational thinking. They can't think through the weighing up the pros and cons in their head very well. Let's have a look at an example. This is an example presented by a recent Nobel Prize winner in economics, and he'd been doing a lot of research into behavioral economics. And his example goes like this. A consumer finds out that the watch she is about to buy is 100 Swedish krona cheaper in another shop. Now she chooses to go to the other shop if the watch costs 1,000 krona, but she won't do so if it costs 10,000 krona, even though the saving in krona is the same. The saving both times is 100 krona. Why would you do this? Well, the explanation he found is that the person here is focusing on the percentage saving rather than on the actual saving. And so here they are making a poor decision or a poor comparison. The saving both times is 100 krona because they're not thinking about it very well. They're doing poor computations in their head. So this can often lead to irrational behavior. There are also some other behavioral traits that tend to muddle with people's rational thinking. The first one is choice overload, or the paradox of choice. So when presented with lots of different options, people find it very difficult to pick one and actually end up not picking anything or finding it a less fulfilling experience than if they're presented with a very limited amount of choices. Some supermarkets have decided to reduce their product lines quite significantly as a response to the growing market shares of other supermarkets that have far fewer choice for their customers, and customers tend to prefer choosing between 6, say, rather than 25 different types of ketchup. The second one is behavioral nudge. A good example here was a bike manufacturer, and you can see that on the right hand side, and they had a lot of problems with their bikes being shipped, and when they were shipping the bikes were getting damaged. Now what they did was they put an image of a TV on the side of the box. Still clearly is about bikes, but there's just this image of the TV. People who were handling the boxes felt they had to take a lot greater care in them, and that saw a huge reduction in the delivery damage. And that's nothing to do with the delivery people being rational. They should have been handling the boxes the same way, but this little image here gave them a nudge in terms of their behavior. The next one is priming. So for example, sometimes businesses can set you up to make a purchase. For example, some shops use fast tempo music to increase your heart rate to make you more likely to try and buy things. And the last one is scarcity bias. Things that we believe to be scarce, we unconsciously value more than things that we believe to be plentiful just because they are scarce. So when we see, oh, last hotel room, only one left at this price, we think, oh, it's very scarce, so I have to buy it. If we knew actually this wasn't true and there was plenty of hotel rooms, we wouldn't value it as highly. So in this video, we looked at the assumption of rationality and looked at why this might not always be the case in the field of behavioral economics. That's it. Thanks for listening.